Hi, you're listening to Behind the Bib podcast with Lisa Watkins. Real talk for every runner. Hey y'all, welcome back to Behind the Bib, the podcast for every pace, every runner, and every story. Today we are getting super salty with Dylan Glass and Josh Cornett from Return to Sport Physical Therapy. They are located over in the Swift Recovery. Like if you look at Fleet Feet, if you're standing and looking at Fleet Feet is on the left. Swift Recovery is on the right, and they have a portion of Swift Recovery in there. So we will be talking to them this afternoon. And before I get started, though, I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I decided to contact these fine folks over at Return to Sport. And that is because we went for our first really, I guess it was, you could call it our first really hot run, right? Summer is coming fast and furious here in the South. It is certainly coming in like a lion, even though I think that's technically like for, what is it, March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb, something like that. But it was a pretty hot run, and we got back and we're like super, I don't know if your runs are like this, but we got back and it was we were super salty. Like you can feel the salt on your skin, on your arms. And then, I get back home and the dog's just like lick because you're covered in salt, right? And so you must taste pretty yummy. So we get back from our run and I was like, that would be a super great episode. We're just getting into summer. And some folks out there, I don't think a lot of folks know that you have to actually replace the salt that you lose when you're sweating during the summer because you sweat, right? And that sweat is full of minerals, and one of those minerals is salt. That's also the reason why you happen to chafe, is because you get these little tiny crystals because your sweat has salt in these little mineral crystals. And it's those little mineral crystals that are rubbing and chafing and creating these tiny, tiny little scratches in your skin. And that's actually what chafing is, right? So we got back from our run. Everyone was feeling a little salty. In more ways than one, because it was the hill run behind Fleet Feet. I don't know if y'all have run those hills back there, but they are necessary, but man, they're hard. So we got back and I was like, dang, that would be a really great episode to talk about salt replacement. And I went on and I started Googling. I knew that you could have salt tests. Well, lo and behold, Return to Sport, which is like a stone's throw from me over here, actually does a salt test. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think that they're actually going to have a little setup so that if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see the test as they're performing the test. And if you're just listening, go watch YouTube and then you can see it. But without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Dylan and Josh, and hopefully you will find it useful. Okay, we'll see you guys on the other side. All right, awesome. Welcome, Dylan and Josh. We are getting a little salty this afternoon on Behind the Bib. These guys have joined us from Return to Sport here in Huntsville, Alabama. Welcome, Dylan and Josh.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Okay, so in the introduction, I told folks a little bit about why I contacted you, which was we did a run from Fleet Feet the other day and we got back, and the summer runs, you get back and you're like covered. And I don't know if you are, but I'm a very salty sweater. I come back and I'm like covered in it. And it's just like this, it's all over. And then I get home and the dog's just like licking because you're like tasty, right? You're pre-seasoned. So we got back and I was like, that would be a fantastic episode. We're fixing to hit the really hot summer months, right? And I know I have several different kinds of salt, that I take, but I've never had like a real system. I don't know exactly how much I do, how much I don't. And I thought, well, I'll just Google, the salt test and see what we have. And I was like, look at that. It's right over here at Return to Sport, and it's like right next door. So that is why I contacted you. So thank you for being on Behind the Bib today.
Yeah. It's definitely a tool we use. We're using more as it's getting a little warmer. So people are trying to find the information that helps them to be the most effective in their running. Obviously, here in Alabama, we have a lot of humidity, so we lose a lot of fluid in our runs. And so hopefully we can provide a little bit of advice and guidance on how to use the information that we can provide for people to make sure they're staying healthy on the runs.
Awesome. Okay, so before we get into the salt test and all things salinity, tell us about you guys. So, what's your background with running or sport, and what Return to Sport is?
Yeah, so we're basically a sports PT focused clinic, and we focus on all things injuries plus performance. So we kind of put everything together so that it's all in one place. So say you come to us for an injury, we can work through the injury, get you out of pain, progress you, get you stronger and more fit for what you want to do, and then get you back into, whatever sport or activity it is. So say that's running, obviously we want to get you all the way to starting and getting to a finish line and meeting those goals. So that's kind of what our general focus is. We do treat a ton of runners, and that's our main focus. And yeah, since we started here in this building in June, we actually got the sweat tests then from Precision Hydration and Fuel. And they're a great company, by the way. They do a lot of good stuff with their gels and with their chews and with their drink mix and their electrolytes. So they actually make the sweat test, and I got to Googling because I'm curious too. I'm a runner, right? And me and Josh do ultras and shorter stuff, and as you get into all this longer stuff, it really, really, really matters.
It really matters. Okay.
To your salt levels or to your hydration amount or to your carb intake, like something is going to fail, right? And so this is one of those numbers that you can get that you're going to know is a constant. And once you know this constant number, you can make sure that this is right every single time, right? So if I can dial this part in, then the rest of it's pretty easy. I just need to make sure I'm drinking enough actual water with it and I'm taking enough carbs with it, and then I got all things working well.
Cool. So y'all are both ultra runners.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So I just talked to one of my run buddies. She's a big ultra runner, and y'all probably know her, Christy Harris. And I just interviewed a young man on here the other day that had completed his first 100-miler. I think it was 100-miler, the Lake Martin 100. Yeah. So, I talked to Landon Brewski, who had done that. So I know we didn't talk about this question. So, but have you forayed into the hallucination ground before on any of your runs?
I have not. I've only done 100K so far. Josh has done 100-milers, so.
I've done 2 100-milers. The first one I didn't hallucinate, but I about fell asleep walking. I had a knee injury, so I got to walk the last 10, 12 miles in, and I was like dozing while standing up. But no, never hallucinated, thankfully.
That blows my mind. How can you do? I've heard people do that. Like you're falling asleep walking.
It's your body's like, what are you doing? The sun's coming up again. Like you haven't slept. And I think at that point I was up my race took me like 28 hours. So I was awake for like 30-ish. And there's 100-milers that take a lot longer than that. I know there's some harder ones that up in the 40-hour range just because of the elevation profile. You're not that long. The Cocodona, for people that are familiar, just happened.
Yeah, I know Coco.
Yeah. I don't understand how people do that with 20 minutes of sleep up for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. So yeah.
I know. You see all the DNFs afterwards, and they're like, yeah, I DNF'd at mile 225. And you're like, 225 miles. You're like,
yeah, I should call it something different. It's not a DNF at that point.
I know. It's like, is that really a DNF if you run 225 miles? I don't know. Okay. All right. We went down. I tend to do this. It's okay because you get to talking about running, and this is the best thing. Okay. So let's talk about salt and why it's such a big deal, and then explain the salt test.
Yeah.
So, and am I saying it right? First of all, it's not like sodium hydrate, like it's just salt test, right?
Yeah, so the test itself is actually testing for the ratio of salt that's in your sweat. So it's not testing how much you sweat, right? That's a little bit more specific to fluid levels, but it's actually testing the percent of sodium in your sweat. And so they test sodium specifically because it is the highest electrolyte need that we have. We have needs for, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and whatnot, calcium. But the sodium is the prime one that matters the most because it's an extracellular component in our bloodstream. And so with that, everybody's sodium sweat rate is different. So the amount that's in Josh's sweat might be, 1,500 milligrams per liter, and mine might be 750 milligrams per liter. That's half of what Josh's is. And just even farther into the spectrum with like 200 and 300 milligrams per liter of sweat to like 2,000, 2,500 milligrams per liter. So everybody is so different. The coolest part is that it's kind of specific to you and it doesn't change much over your life. So it's not based on how fit you are. It's not based on how much you're sweating. It's really just kind of that constant number that you can dial into. So that's why it's super helpful to get this done. It's a one-time test. You do it and you're done, and you know your general concentration levels.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's one of the things I was reading about when I was reading about the test is that like after infancy and early childhood, it's like baselined, right? And then it just doesn't change like metabolism or anything. It doesn't like your fitness level, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't change. It just kind of stays stable forever.
Yeah. Yep. And so a lot of times before we do the test, I always try to tell people and a lot of people have done this, go do a sweat rate test. You weigh yourself in the nude before you run. You try to keep it relatively constant. So usually an hour is the easiest way to measure that. And then you dry yourself off and you weigh yourself again. With ideally not drinking anything. If you drink something, it needs to be measured so you can add that back to your weight. And that kind of gives you an idea of how much sweat loss. So you just put it in fluid ounces. And you can kind of take that weight ratio. So I lost, we'll say, like I've done a sweat test on a treadmill, and I lose around 1.1 liters an hour, which is a fair amount. And that is changed. That was a hot summer on a treadmill, but that number might change in the winter. In the winter, I might only lose half a liter an hour. So that number does change. So we always recommend people like this number is going to be variable based on climate, those kind of things. So do a few times, do it in the spring, do it in the summer, do it in the fall. But you calculate that number with the sweat data you get here, and you can know, okay, I'm sweating 1 liter an hour. For me, I'm a very salty sweater. Like I said, I'm around 1,450 milligrams per 32 ounces. That's kind of the number of measurements. It makes it easier for people.
Okay.
Get up into, that's basically a liter. And so per 2 16-ounce bottles, I'm having to put in 750 milliliters of salt per bottle for me to stay on top of my sodium levels. But I'm also losing a liter an hour, so I'm having to drink a lot of water too. And you may not be able to sustain a full 100, like 1-to-1 ratio of liquid. You may only get 75-80% of that liquid back in an hour based on what your tolerance is to female stomach it, and the rest, certainly the type of running you're doing based on pace. But being able to dial in, okay, if I'm going to drink this much water, that's how much salt I need in that particular container to make sure I'm staying on top of my sodium levels.
Yeah. So his ratio, even if he had a gallon jug, that ratio of sodium in that gallon jug would be the same as it was in this bottle. And that's what you actually learn from it the most, is that despite the bottle, you know exactly what the ratio is that you need to the water.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're doing, I don't know what your feelings are about scratch or whatever, but you can take, whatever's in your scoop of scratch or something like that and figure out exactly how much you need to be putting back in.
Yep, exactly. So sometimes if you're doing a trail race, it's going to be out there for a few hours. You can kind of measure that a little bit. You might be able to refill some water bottles. Sometimes it's as simple as just doing a packet. The precision is nice because it comes in 3 options, like 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams. Or 750, I think. And then so you can know based on what your numbers are, you can get pretty close to that. And so some people might need the 500 milligrams in their bottle. You put a packet, or they have carbonated ones as well. Or you might be on my end, and I need a whole 751 per bottle to make sure I'm getting my numbers back in. And so that high variability is why a lot of people have troubles, is because they're probably underdosing salt quite a bit.
I've always found, like, when we're doing our long runs in the summertime, as you're like, I don't know if y'all do the fall marathons, but we'll start training for fall marathon again. And in the summertime, I can always feel like when I start getting foggy or something like that, and I'm like, it's time for a gel, it's time for something. But then when I really start to feel bad, I'm like, probably need some salt. And then I'll either take the, the bay salt or the salt tabs or something like that. And sure enough, 20 minutes or so, and I start feeling like myself again, like my brain is starting to work again. And I'm still tired, but I'm not feeling, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not feeling really bad, right? I'm just tired and I'm not foggy anymore, and I can still like have a conversation and things like that.
It's hard in long distance running to figure out which variable is the problem. So if we can eliminate multiple variables, like if you stay on top of hydration, you're doing good about getting carbs in, then you kind of know what the problem is when it kind of rises. Like, I've been drinking plenty. I'm getting plenty of liquids in. I'm getting plenty of salt in. It probably is carbs at that point. I just need to eat more. And so if we can eliminate little variables in our runs, it can make your outcomes a whole lot better. I can't tell you how many times pickle juice has saved my life on a trail.
Oh my God, I love it.
Right? And I'm like, you think I would learn by now that just I need more salt. And finally, I had done this test. I was like, I am losing a ton of salt. And that's my problem. I was bonk at, a certain point. I know now I'm cramping. I'm getting that dizzy, kind of dehydrated kind of feeling.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Awesome. So are y'all actually going to be doing a salt test like the test today? Or are you going to show like how it's done?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, show us.
Yeah. All right. So we kind of go through a couple stages. So what we do to induce sweating is we have a machine here through the precision hydration. It's called iontophoresis. So it's
Say that again.
Iontophoresis.
Iontophoresis
is using an electrical signal through a positive and negative electrode to create sweat. So we have two in the forearm. The red one is the one that's going to produce just basically a sweat spot. Iontophoresis is actually used quite often in medication as well, so it can push things through the skin. But we do that. It only takes about 5-10 minutes for it to kind of be done. And then after that, we have a sweat collector, which is just a little very, very thin microtube that we strap to you. And so once that's strapped on, it has some blue dye in it so we can see how much of that has filled up. It takes about 5-10 minutes as well. Once we get enough of that vial filled out, we're able to take that off. And we have, again, some more microtubes. And then we'll use this machine, which is our sweat test. This is the actual machine that allows the calculation. And we run basically just the individual sweat through that microtube into the machine, and it spits out a number. And so by using that number, which is going to be in millimoles of sodium, we plug that into the system. The Precision Hydration has a really easy to use website that does a lot of the calculations for us, and it gives you like a whole readout of what those data looks like. And so once we have figured out that, it puts it into, like I said, for me, it tells me I am losing 1,400 milligrams of sodium per 32 ounces of liquid. So it's just easy to kind of use for people that we could put it into like a liter, essentially. A liter is like 33 ounces, I believe, fluid ounces. And so we can use that number then, and that's your number. And so you can hold on to that number. So that number's not going to change. And then the website's free to use. And so as long as you have your sweat data of how much you lose, some people don't get it done in time. We can just put like, I'm a moderate sweater, we can kind of guess, but they have access to it. So they can come back, say, okay, I finally got my 1 hour sweat test. I know I'm sweating 0.8 liters an hour, say. I can put that number into the system with my calculated millimoles. It will give me my ratio. And then that way you have the access to that whenever you need it. So all in all, the test only takes about 20 minutes. And 20 minutes. Really sweaty because we do the sweat test on the forearm. So that's kind of nice.
Nice.
That way it's kind of sterilized. We don't have any output. If you go sweat and you just, you're running and then you try to do it, it's hard to say how precise that data is. So this is very just clean, sterile area. We know it's just purely your sweat and nothing else is in it. And so I just do it that way.
Okay. Yeah. So you can clean it off really well, and then it's just it's a good sample.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Very cool. So, you talked about doing the sweat test, and folks can do that at home, right? You just talked about how you just weigh yourself in the nude before you go out, maybe an hour, come back, weigh yourself again. And so you can get that you can get that difference. And then that combined with the salt test. And you said that you can plug this into the website. What website are you talking about?
Yeah, the precision hydration, we provide that to the individual. It's online.
Okay.
All it is like, okay, let's put your report in essentially, and you plug your numbers in, you put in your height, weight, all that kind of extra data in there. You can even put in a race report, which is really cool. So let's say you have, let's say it's a marathon. We'll say a marathon. Your marathon coming up, you can put when it is, what marathon it is. Sometimes they're already like in the system, which is kind of cool. You put your data in there, and it will actually give you a plan of what you should be doing in your race as far as for your hydration. And they do nutrition as well, so they will tell you kind of expected carbs as well. That might vary person to person. I tend to want more carbs when I'm running, so I usually add more to the system that it provides. But it gives you kind of a race report as well. And again, it's all free to use. You just have to know your numbers, and once you know the numbers, you can plug them in.
Very cool. Very cool. So you said Precision Hydration is the company that y'all go through for the test materials, and you said that they have their own sodium kind of packets too. Yeah. And some of these folks, and I don't know why my video is like stalling, but yeah, some of these folks, you can see it. Yeah, thank you. So if you'll describe it a little bit, because some people are just listening to this and some people are watching it on YouTube.
Yes.
So talk about what the different packets are and just describe them some.
Yeah, so we have 3 different packet sizes that they supply, and it's a 500, a 1,000, and a 1,500 is what they call it. They actually have half of that number in each packet, basically because this is supposed to go in a 16-ounce bottle, right? So the 1,500, if I put one packet in a 16-ounce bottle and the other packet in a 16-ounce bottle, that's 1,500, right?
Okay, gotcha.
That's why they say it that way.
Okay.
And so for me, I use 1,000s. And I put one in each bottle, right? And so I'm around that 1,000 number. I know I'm good to go. They're really nice. They don't break down when they get wet. Like I did my 100K with probably 15 of these in my pack. And I would
really?
I would just take 2 out, pour them in my bottles at aid stations, and then put the bottles together and go. And so on the go, it's really, really easy, honestly. It doesn't take that long to get them in your bottles and just add them to regular water.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, because like the salt tab, some of the salt tab like packets, they do break down, you know. Yeah, pretty bad.
Like, well, I have no salt anymore. Great.
Yeah, exactly. It's all in my vest. So that's awesome. Yeah, it's helpful to me to be in my vest. Okay, cool. Now, how do you guys feel about I love the elements. Like, how do you feel about Element or like the cans of Element? Is there any other products out there that y'all recommend? You literally drinking one right now.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's great. I think most of the electrolyte products are great. You like with anything, you just need to know how much is in them, right? So with an Element, it's 1,000 milligrams. So if you need 1,000 milligrams, that's awesome. But if you don't, like maybe you need more, maybe you need a little less. You just need to know what's right for you. So if you can just get that dialed in more specifically towards, the events you're doing and towards your specific ratio, then you'll know it's perfect. But you can't just say, I drank an Element, I'm fine, right? Because that's different for everybody. So it just depends.
Okay. So is there a difference between taking it during your race and then taking it after your race? Obviously, if you're taking it during your race, your performance during the race is going to be better. But like, what about after it? Do you do both?
Yes, is the answer really?
Okay.
If you can do it during, it's obviously going to lead to a much better performance. Your muscles can load optimally if they have all of those electrolytes on board and all of that hydration on board. The hydration is also honestly the most critical factor. If you don't have water in your body, how are your muscles going to adequately contract and relax and do their jobs, right?
Yeah.
They're going to start to fail, and mechanics are going to falter, and that's when injuries happen too. So keeping the hydration and the electrolytes up during the race, even if it's a shorter race, I would say it is still pretty important. Even past about an hour, I would say is kind of our window if we could get away with not using anything. So in a 10K, if you can run a 10K in under an hour, you probably don't have to worry so much about it during the event. But I would definitely still be trying to preload a little bit before the event. So I myself would take an element. I would drink an element the night before so that I get that higher level of sodium content, and then maybe, an hour or two before do the same thing or half of one. So I'm kind of trying to get a little more preloaded with salt, so I have a little bit more more hydration on board in my body. That way I just don't crash at the end. And for longer events, I still do that, but I'm going to want to, stay more regimented during the process, during the event too.
Gotcha. That's very cool. So anything over an hour, you're doing this during the event. Anything under an hour, then you may want to consider preloading the night before and then just before the race, a few hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. I have done that with like sports drink before, but not anything as sodium high as like an element. I might want to consider that in some of these upcoming summer races.
Yeah.
So
it'll make you feel better, especially with a race that's coming up like Cotton Row. Like, it's so hot, right?
it is. Yeah.
So having just a little bit more hydration on board, you're going to weigh a couple pounds more because of the sodium, but that's kind of a good thing, right? Because you're going to burn right through it in the race. So it can be very helpful.
All right. Y'all heard Dylan say it. Like if you're running Cotton Row coming up, this coming, it's Monday, right? Because my daughter's getting married this weekend, and so I'm not actually running it. It's the first time in a few years. But you heard Dylan say it. If you're running Cotton Row this weekend, you might want to consider preloading and the night before and then the morning before the race, and you'll be a little salt heavy, but I think it might be worth it. Because it is supposed to be warm this weekend. It's not going to be a cool Cotton Row. For sure. All right. So tell people how they can find out more, like where they can find Return to Sport, how they can sign up to do this test, tell what your socials are, tell them all the things.
Okay. Well, as far as where we are, we're located right next to Fleet Feet, Jones Valley. So that's right here in Huntsville. And then as far as like signing up for a sweat test, you can look on our website, www.returntosportpt.com. And we have it linked on there where you can just click to basically sign up for a sweat test, and you can look at the calendar right there and just pick a time.
Oh, cool.
Easy. And then if you have any questions about it or want to talk to one of us, you can just call our number as well. And that's 256.
What's my number?
513.
Wait, what's my number? Don't call myself.
I can't see what you're looking at.
513-9525.
There we go.
256-513-9125.
9525.
9525. Okay. All right. We finally got
put
it.
it in the notes. There we go.
Yeah, I know. We got there. And I will. What I'll do. And what are your socials real quick?
Yeah. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Return to Sport PT. The Instagram handle is returntosport.pt, I believe.
Okay.
So definitely find us there.
Awesome. Because what I'll do is I'll put that stuff down in the show notes below, and so they can just, they can see all the socials as well as like the phone number once we get it right. Put it in the show notes for folks. Also,
another note is you can look for a sweat testing center on Precision's website.
Okay.
So if you look on their website and say you're shopping around, you can just hit where's the location, and it will tell you at Return to Sport. So that's helpful too.
I actually, when I said Google, I think I might have gone through Precision Hydration to find it because it drops a little like pin where you can find it. And that's where I clicked, and I was like, oh my God, well, that's just right here. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, we've had some people come from Birmingham and Georgia and a few other places just to kind of come do a test.
Because I didn't see any like in the Tennessee Valley area, down from Nashville over to Atlanta. I think you guys are like one of the only ones that do this in our area, aren't you?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see any on the map, at least the map that I saw that was like, who are the folks that do this? So I was like, hey, that's pretty lucky for us to have it here in Huntsville for our running community. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So before we go, first of all, thank you for showing us like what the sweat test is and talking about salt and salt replacement or sodium replacement during your runs. I love that tip about if your run is less than an hour, consider preloading the night before and then the morning of the race. I think that's great advice. Before we go, do you have, like, in each of you, do you have just one piece of advice for the listeners today? Like, what do you want them to walk away with? It doesn't have to be salt related. It can be like just life related, because we do kind of have, life with a side of running, right? So, what's one piece of advice? And Dylan, we'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that's made me be able to be better at everything I do is just understanding that consistency is the key, right? So making sure that I stay consistently trying to achieve that goal, that eventually is going to get me to where I want to go. It may start with not being very good at something or, not being as successful as I eventually want to be. But over time, if you're just kind of stacking the bricks, doing what you're supposed to do, that consistency is going to pay off. So I think that's the biggest takeaway. With everyday life stuff to sports stuff, I think that's what really matters, and that's where people are actually going to find the success they're looking for.
I love that. Consistency is key, and it's very true. All right, Josh, what about you?
Yeah, kind of to parallel that, I would say my biggest thing is going to be don't be afraid to have fun with running. We get kind of stuck sometimes. Try something new. Go do a run club. Go do a new event. Jump on the trails. I'm always going back and forth. Trails for a while. I've got the 100-miler, and now I want to get back running the fast. And so just mix it up. I mean, running, if you just do the same thing every day, it's going to get real boring. So
real fast.
Have fun with it. Keep running fun.
I love that. And this really, I told y'all before, this really is my favorite part. Like, I love how much I'm learning, talking to you guys. And, but my favorite part is all these personal experiences and then the advice that folks leave, because boy, it's so true. Consistency, really is key. I didn't really start to see improvement in my running until I just showed up consistently. And then, having fun and joining the run clubs. I talked to, Pup Run. I had Jeff and Jerry on the podcast, and then the Tuesday after Cotton Row, I'm actually talking to Rocket City runners as well. And so, if y'all have more run clubs that you know about, let me know. I would love to talk to them too. And I joined my first Rocket City runners a few weeks ago, and so yeah, it's great because they all offer something different. Right. And it just keeps it fun and exciting. And you're not just running the same route every day for the same Strava kudos,
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Dylan and Josh, thank you so much for being on Behind the Bib today. It has been a super salty talk, but I appreciate your willingness to be here and to tell everybody about the salt testing and the salt replacement and to offer a little piece of advice from Return to Sport. So I appreciate you both so very much. And we will see you next time y'all are Behind the Bib.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Right.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, was that not a great conversation between Dylan and Josh and I talking about salt and sodium replacement? I really did learn some really great tips and tricks for understanding how much sodium you lose during your runs and then how much you should be adding back. And that salt test is actually pretty cool because when I first started Googling this stuff, I thought, man, that's going to be intense because you got to get enough salt like you're in there running on the treadmill or something. No, that's not even it. They put 2 little electrodes on your arm and they induce sweating, and then they collect that sweat, and then they use all the fancy formulas and mechanisms. And then on the other end of it, you understand how much sodium you lose during your run or during your workout. And I think that is super helpful because then you know how much to add back. And it was really cool, the difference between, so there's a huge variability apparently between when you're not a super salty sweater and when you're a very salty sweater. Like, there is a big difference, like between Dylan and Josh just themselves, on how much sodium they lose. And so really great tips on if your race is less than an hour, then kind of preload some salt the night before and then the morning of the race. So if you're doing like Cotton Row and you're right around an hour, you may not have to add any during the race. And so you can do the preload the night before and the morning of the race. But if you're out there much longer than an hour, you might want to consider adding in some salt because that is one hot race. All right, so a big, huge thank you to Dylan and Josh for coming on Behind the Bib and talking about sodium loss during your workout and then their sodium salt test that they can do. And they're one of the few in the Southeast. I went on there and looked, and there's like nobody in Nashville, nobody in Atlanta. And so we're really lucky to have this so close in our community. They're right there beside Fleet Feet in Jones Valley. So super easy. Okay, and I forgot to ask them this while I was talking to them, but Return to Sport is actually offering a special on these sodium tests. Normally these tests, I mean, they're a little expensive, but you only have to do it once, and it's like the rest of your life. So it's the test is normally $300, but through the end of May, the test is only going to be $150. And now you don't have to do the test before the end of May, but you just have to call and book it, and they will honor that half off price of $150. And I think that's totally worth it to understand how much sodium that you need to be replacing. And I fully intend to, once I get through the wedding this coming weekend, I am going to be hitting up Return to Sport to go over there and do a sodium test. So Dylan and Josh, thank you so much for coming on and for educating me as well as my listeners about the salt test and how much salt you lose during your run. I appreciate it. You didn't have to do that, and thank you so much for coming on here. All right, folks, let's talk about the upcoming races before we get off of here. And by the way, these races are always linked down below in the show notes. And so if you want to just click on the show notes, and if you hear a race that might spark your fancy, the show notes will have the link to go and register. All right, you heard us talk a whole lot about the Cotton Row 10K, 5K, and 1 mile fun run. That's coming up on Monday, May 26th, Memorial Day. That's going to be in downtown Huntsville, and I've said it a million times on here. If you are doing that 10K and you have not pre-run the course, you need to at least go. You may be out of time to run it, but you might need to go drive it because there's a hella hill in that race, and you need to go experience it before the actual race day. So after that, on June the 4th, we've got the Big Run 5K. There's going to be one happening out there's one in Huntsville. I think that one's going to be at John Hunt Park. And then on June the 7th, there's the Big Run 5K that's happening out in Madison. That's going to be in conjunction with the Hill and Crank Duathlon on June 7th as well. That's out there in Research Park. All right. And also, if you're listening and you're like, man, I wish I had a runner because I have a bike and I don't want to run, but I have a bike, hit me up because I'm still looking for somebody that might have a bike that would be interested in doing the relay for that race. So hit me up. We might can do it. All right. Also on June the 7th, sponsored by Huntsville Track Club, is the Eurocross 5K and 8K. And then coming up at the end of June, on June 21st, you have the Cookie Fix, Cookie Crusher 5K, and kids, let's see, I think the kids is a 200-yard dash for that one. I'm not sure on that, though. That one is put on by the Alabama Race Series. And if you happen to know who is organizing that race, it looks really cool, and I want to talk to them. So hit me up if you know who is organizing the Cookie Fix, Cookie Crusher. I'd like to chat with them a little bit. Also on June 21st, if you're not into a road race, the Alabama A&M Trail Race is happening. This race is free to Huntsville Track Club members, and if you're not a Huntsville Track Club member, it's only $10 for right now. So go register for that one if you're wanting to hit up a trail race in June. And then if you've got some itty-bitties out there that are wanting to do the June 28th Pesky Piranha Youth Triathlon, go check it out. All right, folks. So that is it for episode 19 of Behind the Bib. do me a favor. Please go out there and check on a girl on the Behind the Bib podcast on Instagram, Behind the Bib on Facebook, and Behind the Bib podcast on YouTube, where you can see this crazy mug on a video, or you can see like little salt packets and stuff like that Dylan and Josh were holding up. They also demonstrated the machine that we talked about today. So if you want to see what it looks like, go out there on YouTube and check it out. All right. Thanks for being here, everyone, whether you're first or last or somewhere in between. I'll see y'all next time. We're Behind the Bib. Take care.